Another way to look at this, take a path. If you have a path and nobody walks through it, all places are equal. But what happens is one person walks there, and then 2 people, and then 100 people. You start to have these paths that are built into the forest itself, and they become, they become almost a fixed place where people walk. Well, as we have certain beliefs and we have certain habits and certain experiences, these kind of patterns become like paths in our brains that we naturally walk down and we naturally behave according to. This is the power of how the brain works. Another example, I got to go on a safari 2 or 3 years ago, and this is a Maasai tribe. Fellow on the left, Michael, and 3 of his wives and his cousin on the right. Interesting enough, he told me, he said, hey, to become a chief of my tribe, I had to kill a lion. I think he was making it up, but anyways, he told me he killed a lion. But he's actually wearing around his neck, you can hardly see, he has the claw of the lion around his neck that he said he killed. He might be telling the truth. These guys are crazy. Now, one thing about the Maasai tribe, some Maasai tribe, they consider something a delicacy, a great smell you and I would not consider. It's cow urine, like a perfume. They'll actually have cow urine as a perfume. Now, some of your faces are like, nasty. Why would they do that? Now look, even young people, as they grow up in the Maasai tribe, and they smell this and they associate it with positive things, their brain actually becomes formed in a certain way where they experience pleasure out of a smell that can only bring you and I pain. Because they formed their brains like the foods we eat, right? We didn't really choose it. We just eat them over again. We smell them. We were fed to them. And our brain naturally likes those foods. This is how the brain works because neurons that fire together wire together. Okay, one more example. Then I think you'll get it. In Elizabethan times, like Shakespearean times, when a lover would be away from his, I almost said lovey, beloved. That's weird. From his beloved, they would do something so you would remember their scent when they were away. See, they would take an apple and they'd put it in their armpit. It's called a love apple. And they would let it soak up their smell as strongly as they can, then give it to their lover to put in a bag so when he misses her, he can smell her scent. Now, some of you guys are like, that's a good idea. If you think that's a good idea, please do not go on a date for a long time. Now, we think this is gross to a degree because we do everything in our culture, deodorant, cologne, to shun body odor. But people before this type of technology got used to it, and they actually at times would find it pleasurable to have the scent of their lover. What's the point? What we experience, right? What we routinely kind of see and what we believe and what we do forms paths in our brain that shapes our behavior. All right, now why is this significant? Here's what Dr. Malkahaney says. He says, we can acquire sexual and romantic tastes and inclinations that get wired into our brains and can have a powerful impact for the rest of our lives. So you see what happens? As somebody looks at a pornographic magazine, as they watch a pornographic movie, they start to form pathways in their brains so they associate sexual pleasure with those images. And then it gets locked into that person so they can't experience sexual pleasure apart from those exact images without totally restructuring the physical makeup of their brains. That's how powerful this is. So Pamela Paul wrote this. She says, boys who look at pornography excessively become men who connect arousal purely with the physical, losing the ability to become attracted by the particular features of a given partner. Instead, they recreate images from pornography in their brain while they're with a real person. I remember years ago, I was a child with my dad. I'm guessing 10, 11, 12 years old. My dad would speak out publicly on the issue of sexuality. And people would come up afterwards, talking to him all the time. And I remember this fellow came up, I guess in his 20s or so. And he asked to speak to my dad. And he said, sure, if my son can sit. And he goes, I need to just speak with you. And my dad said, okay. So I remember watching. Later, my dad came up to me, and when the guy was gone, he said, you know, I want you to never forget what this man shared. I said, well, what was it? He said, this guy grew up He said, this guy's married to a wife who he said is beautiful. He said, but he cannot reach a sexual climax with his wife when they're being intimate without having a Playboy magazine on the pillow next to her head. Why? Because he had looked at pornography over and over and over again and mapped his brain to respond sexually to images on a magazine which are faked and they're airbrushed and nobody in real life can match up to. It doesn't affect me. I'll quit later. You see how naive these ideas are? But this isn't all that's to the incredible brain that God has given us. You see, as I said earlier, your brain becomes trained to sexually cue a computer. That's what happens. Your brain actually becomes wired to cue a computer rather than a human being who has emotions and who has an experience and who has a smell and who's present with you. All those things are not present when you're involved with somebody, when you're looking at pornography. Well, the other part of the brain is something called neurochemicals. Now, neurochemicals send messages from one cell to another. One of the neurochemicals that we're going to talk about is something called dopamine. It's the reward chemical that makes us feel good for taking risks. Have you ever gone on a roller coaster and you're nervous and then all of a sudden you take it? How do you feel afterwards? You have like this natural high, right? I remember when I was a kid, I was at this camp and we're like probably 5th or 6th graders, and these two rocks had fallen together under the water. And like typical boys, we were trying to swim underneath through a crevice in a rock, come up the other side, right? Obviously, there were no moms around at this point. And I remember all the guys are like, do it, do it. Look, I know you're judging me. You're like, you gave in to peer pressure. They double dog dared me. I had no choice. My manliness in 5th grade was on the line. So I remember the guys like, go down and follow the light up to the left. I was like, cool, I can do that. I remember going down and seeing it dark to the left, light to the right. I was like, obviously swam to the light, to the right. Got out from it. I was nervous. I don't like enclosed spaces. And I remember getting up, feeling this sense of high, like, I took a rush. I took a risk. Well, this is dopamine. If you've pushed yourself in an athletic event, at the end you feel this high, like you watch the Olympics. And these guys just run and run, push themselves. And all of a sudden they have this extra energy because dopamine has been flooded into their bodies. You see, God has designed the brain that when we push ourselves physically or we take risks, there's kind of a natural reward that feels good, this natural high that comes with it. There's nothing wrong with that. That drives us to compete more sometimes. Well, the problem is, do you know what pornography does? Is it goes to the exact part of the brain chemicals, dopamine, that drugs release as well. You see, when you take a drug, what happens? Your body short circuits the natural process you're supposed to go through to get dopamine, and it sends the chemicals instantly that gives you that feeling of a natural high. The exact same chemicals are involved in looking at pornography.